Hello and welcome to another episode of VCC TV. I have with me a very special guest today, Suvir Sujan of Nexus Venture Partners. Suvir, thank you for talking to VC Circle.
Thank you.
And my first question, if you were to map the early stage investment ecosystem in the country, so I think what we're seeing right now that we have on one end, one spectrum, we have accelerators, reason to invest in pre-revenue, pre-presentation stage kind of companies. On the other end, we have investors invest in pre-IPO sort of companies, which are more like the mature industries. Do we really have an ecosystem where we have late-stage investors or more mature investors for technology companies as such? And how do you sort of plug that gap? What are your views there?
It's a very good question. I think we've actually seen over the last 6-7 years that there's quite a robust ecosystem building out in the early stage technology side. And in early stage, I would categorize the seed funds and the angel funds into one bucket, investing in new entrepreneurs, new concepts, and the early stage VCs who come in slightly later with some pre-revenue, some traction, or some proof of concept. Beyond that, what we have seen is historically India has been a private equity market for the last decade of even more than that. And private equity typically has been in the form of investing in mostly companies that are stable revenue generating companies with profits. And most of private equity comes in at a stage where the money is just required to build the company for a few years to an exit, either an IPO or a sale. But none of these private equity firms have a business model where they can afford to lose money or lose in any investment, even in one portfolio company. Their model works where they actually try and put monies into half a dozen companies, and each company gives a certain amount of IRR or return. There is no concept in these private equity firms to basically invest in a portfolio of companies where there's a lot of alpha in the companies, where some companies can return 10 times or 20 times, some companies can go bust. And that's not in their business model. And so we call that the business model of investing in such companies where there's a lot of alpha, late stage VC. Mm-hmm. And late stage VC doesn't exist in this country. And this has been I would say, this has evolved in the US over the last 20-30 years because early stage VC was matured. And they backed hundreds of companies in the technology sector, and those technology firms are now looking at the next level of financing, and because of that there's a mushrooming of late stage VC in the US.
Sure.
India has not seen that yet because I think the VC by itself, I would say, is a 5 or 6 year phenomenon. Mm-hmm. And I think over the next decade we expect to see a few funds coming out that actually are focusing on late stage VC, where the business model is investing in higher risk assets that can either generate supernormal returns or go bust.
But why do you think, what would the rationale and incentive for late stage VC funds really do this?
This is just a good question you're asking. Basically what happens is the model is that if a VC or an angel fund invests in say 25-30 companies, right, and say assume an ecosystem of early stage investments across all the funds and all the angel funds are about say 50 to 100 a year. You look at that from across all the funds. Typically there will be maybe 3 or 4 or 5 companies that are starting to break out from a growth standpoint. Mm-hmm. From the VC and angel portfolio. So the late stage VC is actually taking less risk, and they're only looking at those companies.
Okay.
So generally proof of concept has happened, early revenue has happened, scaled revenue has happened, profits are on the way. So the only risk they're taking is profit risk.
True. They
aren't taking anything else. So therefore the risk is lower, and so they're willing to. So what they do in that situation is they actually, because risk is lower, they're willing to put more money and take higher bets in that one company and say, you know what, I will invest in company XYZ because I'm seeing it break out, and maybe my portfolio will have 5 or 7 such companies, but the VC portfolio has 50 companies, out of which 2 have made it to the next level.
Sure. Do you think somewhere that sort of gap is being met by existing VC funds who are taking like large co-investment rounds? For instance, Flipkart sort of China Global roped in Axel, just to finance the existing company because you necessarily don't have late stage venture investors. So do we see like portfolio fund managers like yours, or Sequoia Capital, sort of getting into that? Roping in more late stage investors for co-investing into the existing portfolio companies?
Yeah, so I think the VCs anyway typically invest in follow rounds. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that is an issue. Issues an Axel or us or anybody else, Sequoia, would invest in later rounds. But there's a limit to our capital size, our fund size. Mm-hmm. So we can only limit to that level. Mm-hmm. But if the fund requires more capital, then you have to go outside.
It's true.
So that gap in a case of a Flipkart, maybe Tiger Global is filling it. But in other cases, if there's no Tiger Global, or then somebody else will fill that gap.
So would we see Nexus Capitalists in for instance, raising that kind of fund in near future, given that there's so much gap there?
We actually are not sure if we are the best people to do that, to be absolutely honest, because the skill sets are still, I would say it's a private equity type skill set with risk associated to it. Right? It's not venture. Venture skill sets are very different. Venture skill sets are more about backing the right entrepreneur early and then spending a lot of time on the company to help the company. So it's a very different skill set we bring in as venture capital. Versus private equity, which is more about, I would say, more about financial structuring.
What about financial engineering?
That's right.
Yeah. Do we really have so many technology companies in the country where there can be a model around late stage venture growth for technology companies as such?
I think we've actually got a portfolio of 40 plus companies. Out of portfolio of 40 plus companies, I would say 25 to 30 companies are technology and internet. Now, that's a large number in the last 5 or 6 years. If you look at some of the other VCs, you probably see a fair bit of technology and internet in their portfolio as well. So I would say that you are now, in the last 5 years, you probably have got 50 to 100 companies that have been backed in these broad technology and internet sectors, and companies are beginning to break out. So there is a InMobi that is breaking out. There is Comely, there's PubMatic, there's Snapdeal, there's Flipkart. There are companies that we are seeing. There's Druva. We're seeing companies that actually are breaking out of the portfolio. And the question will come down to is, where will they raise capital?
What next?
And what next? And where will they raise capital from? So, for example, one of our portfolio companies, PubMatic, raised capital from a US late-stage VC recently, and it was announced in VC Circle. And it is now, if there's such an investor existing in India, there's no reason to go abroad. For example, you see InMobi, right? InMobi raised money from SoftBank. Now, I would bet you if there were enough VCs, late-stage VCs in India, they were invested in InMobi.
Interesting. That's a good way to look at the investment ecosystem. Talking about Nexus India Capital right now and some of your portfolio companies, you've had some interesting exits in the recent past. What about NetMagic? One of the most talked about company out of Nexus stable. What's the next phase of growth for NetMagic?
So NetMagic started off historically as a managed services provider, and their first 5 years was doing a lot of the internet, the e-commerce, the other sort of internet-related sectors, and helping them with managed services. First co-location hosting, then managed services. And now they're evolving one level deeper and saying, how do I do that for larger global corporates across, not only India, across the world. So if there's an XYZ financial services bank that wants to go and outsource disaster recovery, they want to go outsource security of data, who's going to do all this stuff? Okay. So they basically are now saying you will take this on at managed services and do it over the cloud. Okay. And so that's the evolution of where NetMagic is going.
Dim, what is the entire team experience? How do you take a company to an exit like that? Can you just share some insights with entrepreneurs watching this?
So Dimdim actually was a very interesting company. Dimdim actually started off, and that's what we're seeing a lot in India. Now we're seeing entrepreneurs trying to pick niches with their gaps. So the gap Dimdim saw was there's WebEx that is catering to a large corporate audience, and then there's Skype catering to end consumers. There is no product out there that is an SME-based product that is much lower cost than a WebEx at the same WebEx quality, and that's where open source came in. So we'll do it open source, so we can build the same level of quality at a fraction of the cost. Okay. And that was their saying I need to pay, and the words they used was called the prosumer, the professional consumer, who is, for example, the person who is sitting in Boston teaching real estate classes to people across America. Now, what video conferencing tools does that person use? That's a prosumer. There's a person in Hong Kong teaching English to Chinese students in China. So these are all, I would say, home businesses, prosumers, where you need a tool that is enterprise-like, but consumer cost.
It's interesting.
And that's where they came in. And I think Salesforce saw that, because Salesforce actually is in the segment of how do I add on to my portfolio of products where I can actually service my small medium client, and this is a perfect tool for them to add on to Salesforce.
Talking about private equity, I think a lot of money sort of came in the COVID days, 07, 08. I think it's a benign sort of environment, and I think the macro is doing so well. And then money divide the problems by two, the growth is not coming in, this currency has really shot up. So PE funds where they are, we sort of know LPs not necessarily happy with it. But now we suddenly see a lot of VC funds are able to raise money from LPs. What suddenly do you think has changed in the minds of the LPs and about the perception of the early stage investment ecosystem in the country?
No, I think it's a good question. I think what has actually, it's not what has changed. What has happened is that there is this wave of entrepreneurship at the early stage that has been fueled by, it's a chicken and egg, right? We've got in the last 5-7 years, we've gotten people putting money into early stage risk capital. Entrepreneurs are now seeing that and say, you know what, I can start a company, there is Indian risk capital available, let me go start. So that has generated a lot more entrepreneur flow to get risk capital at the venture side. So the deal flow opportunity has increased. So therefore, it's an efficient market. Deal flow has increased, so capital is increasing. The problem with private equity has been that historically, and this is I think more of a cultural Indian phenomena, once an Indian entrepreneur has built a company to a certain scale, they actually are wanting market valuations for a non-public company. And that's not a phenomenon in many parts of the world. And so, because the Indian entrepreneur feels that I have done so much hard work to get here, I deserve this valuation. So it's a macro situation with private equity in general, saying that how does one go ahead and pay you a market multiple or a private company, and it's macro. So there's a macro question about private equity in India, how will they at a mass scale survive if the entry valuations are also going to be high?
But isn't entry valuation high for venture?
No, but relatively venture is, what is high? High is the eye of the beholder. Venture, you know that you will definitely exit at a much higher valuation than your entry point. Because you're not pegging to a public market comparable. You're just saying, it's still early stage valuations, right? You could argue it's half the valuation you want to pay, but you know that if the company grows from here to 10 times, what you exit at will still be higher than what you paid. So it's a very different philosophy of what that means in private equity, because you're going to exit 4 years later. If you're already going to pay what the IPO markets are paying, then where is the money made for you?
That's true. But let me tell you one thing, I think that there are a lot of early stage funds right now, there's a lot of competition. I think private equity went through a phase of correction. So do we see that happening in venture now, early stage?
It's a very good question. I think the ecosystem needs venture capital, and I think I don't think venture capital is that crowded today. In my mind, there's venture capital and there's early stage seed and angel. In venture capital, I would count in my fingers not more than 12, 15 active funds in the country. They're doing true venture capital, which is actually going and putting money into companies that are just tracking or just getting pre-revenue, getting out the door. There's a lot more activity in the incubation seed level where entrepreneurs with concept are getting funded. Now that's required. Unfortunately, that's required, because how do you get an entrepreneur started? That is required. Now, the problem is going to be, the situation is that when you have, the problem that's the situation is did that pipeline of capital expand too quickly? Because the companies that are getting that capital, there's not enough venture capital supporting that capital, those companies. That's the problem today. The problem today is, if you ask any incubator, or you ask any seed fund out there, they will say, we funded a company, but where is the Series A funding?
That's true.
And the question at the end of the day, Series A funding exists, but it exists in the right quantity.
Yeah.
We're doing 6 to 8 investments a year, so is most of my other VC friends, right? But the problem is that if you're going to fund 400 companies at the incubation level, we can't absorb these companies. I can't fund 25 companies. I don't have the bandwidth.
Yeah, that's true.
That's what's going on.
What makes a Nexus different from a Cayman or from Sequoia Capital? Or you think they necessarily have to be different?
No, that's a good question. We ask that question all day long. I think what's different is the point I made. I think all of us in the fund are entrepreneurs. That's one basic difference. Everybody is an entrepreneur. None of us come from a financial services or a consulting background. We've got that background in our experience levels, but we've all started a company. And I think the important part in my mind is that, at least in venture capital, is that if you're unable to empathize with what an entrepreneur is going through, the entrepreneur is going to go through a lot of ups and downs every day of his or her life. And there are going to be small, minute problems to be solved every day. And so, if you're unable to relate to the entrepreneur at that level, to say, pick up the phone, speak to me, and let's talk about what your problems are, I don't think you're doing the best job as a venture capital. You might do a good job as capital provider, but you're not doing the best job as actually helping the entrepreneur think through, from HR hiring issues to pricing issues to product strategy issues to issues related to contracts, negotiating with customers' contracts, to opening new doors, to expanding regionally, to M&A, to buying out new companies. Your thought is, how do you have to put your thought into the entrepreneur. So I think the one thing we've done, I think reasonably well is we actually have all been entrepreneurs. That's the first part. Second thing which I think done well is we've actually got this focus of outside the consumer internet focus in India, the focus of actually also taking technology entrepreneurs from India outside. And that focus, because we're a strong US team as well, the focus is the US team is looking at Indian entrepreneurs going global, which is very different from, I would say, a US fund that has an Indian team where they're typically looking at India investments. Because the US team will look at the US investments. We are an India fund with a US office. So it's very different. It sounds subtle, but extremely different. We are an India fund with a US office, focusing on Indian entrepreneurs going global. I don't think there's anybody else actually, there is nobody else in the country doing that.
You know, if you look at technology space and from investing point of view, I think that can be sort of categorically seen like 3 or 4 like broad buckets as we can see it right now. But of course e-commerce, otherwise of course cloud, that seems to be the next buzzword, and of course when it's mobile. What are your views?
No, I think people ask me that question all the time, and I say we actually are broadly looking at all these sectors, but we are very, very bottom-up investors. And so what we do is when we look at an entrepreneur, we try and understand the entrepreneur's vision and the product. And it could be, for example, tomorrow morning we might be investing in something that's adjacent to this area I've spoken about to you today. It could be, I don't know, security. It could be something that I have not spoken at a large area. But broadly we're saying we're doing software. It's very broad term, software. When you look at software in a very broad term, people come to you and say, there's software on the cloud, there's enterprise software, there's open source software, and then within that we start looking at what are the applications you're working on. So it could be big data analytics, it could be storage, it could be security. So we don't know, it's such a broad area, but all we know is that at a global level, a lot of the legacy software is being replaced at a global level. And they're replaced for 3 or 4 reasons. First reason is it was legacy, so the times are moved on, so people want more features, better features. So that's they replace software for that reason. 2 is there's a whole initiative of I have to pay as you go, which is a whole SaaS model. I'm not going to pay upfront. As I use, I will pay you. So there's a whole new software genre on that. And the third important part is that even if I pay upfront, I want as low cost as possible with the same feature set as enterprise as before. So there's low cost software, there's pay as you go, and it's feature rich. So all these 3 are actually going through revolution in the world today. And so the Indian entrepreneurs are actually catching on to all these different trends, and they're coming up with niches they are very good at. So there'll be some domain person sitting in a town in India who will say, I know this and I'm going to target this. I mean, that's wonderful. Let's spread that back to you.
Interesting. Doesn't that talk about India does not have a product technology company or services companies? Do you subscribe or buy that way?
That's changed a drastic amount in the last 3-4 years. I would say, if you asked me this question in 2007-8, I would say it was just beginning. 2007, 2006, it was just beginning. After today, we are seeing entrepreneurs every day, with product ideas, every day almost. And very interesting ideas. What we actually are seeing, which is more refreshing, is the entrepreneurs are actually thinking global from day one. That's the most important part of this. So they're trying to solve world problems out of India. And it's not about saying I'm going to solve my problem in my backyard. I'm trying to understand what the enterprise in Cincinnati wants, and I'm going to go and target that enterprise. Because I understand this technology so well, I'm going to set on a flight and go sell my technology to the entrepreneur there, to this big company there. That's what we're seeing is changing. So its ability to think global from day one is refreshing.
What are the challenges that you see from the technology companies coming out of India, that you can perhaps a message to your entrepreneur but should focus on more?
I think the biggest challenge we're seeing is for the entrepreneur to be able to initially evangelize his or her product to a global customer in the early days of their company. So what we are telling most entrepreneurs who are thinking global, if you're thinking global, you'll have to spend 6 months in that country you're targeting. If it's going to be the US, go for 6 months in the US, getting that first 2 or 3 clients on board and working with the CIO very closely on their needs. You have to be in their office saying, what do you want? I'm customizing it for you. So that's the first part where Indians are now getting comfortable to go do that. That's the first part. The second part is once you've done that, you have to build a very strong sales team in the US or in whichever country you're going to be focusing on going forward. And that they have to start thinking early enough to say, what kind of profile do I want, where do you want to look at the salesperson, because that's going to make or break your company. At the end of the day, enterprise software is built on great sales. And so, but the initial sales has to be the founder entrepreneur who evangelizes it. So there are two parts to
So
it.
the first two sales from the founders.
The first few sales has to be the founder, because the founder knows his or her product the best. You can't have a hired person go and sell that first customer, because the hired head does not know what the founder knows.
Oh, that's true.
So when you get that into a client, and the client loves that product and it's customized, and the product features are now, I would say, somewhat robust, built out, then the sales guy can say, I know what's working, I will take it to 50 clients now.
That's interesting. And given that you have experience in veteran technology yourself, being an entrepreneur, non-investor with Nexus Capital, what do you think about these online education models like Coursera and Udacity? And we're seeing a lot of such stuff also coming to India. Khan Academy, for instance, it's a revolution. Do we sort of see that kind of models in a space coming out of India?
I think it's very exciting. I think there will be all these models are actually trying to follow a somewhat not-for-profit model. And so I do think the adoption will happen. It's humongous. The question will come down to is, what is the business model behind it? So should there be a subscription-based model around it? And in some cases the answer is yes. In some cases, maybe the Indian consumer doesn't want to pay too much for every micro educational content, so the answer will be no. There'll be less payment, will be more ad supported. So if you ask me the two questions you've asked, will this work, and is there a model around this? Will it work? I think it will work. Is the model around it, is for us as venture capital, we try to figure out which model is for profit, which is non-profit. And we're talking to entrepreneurs trying to figure out that which is venture capital backable versus not. But do I believe the other models will work, even though no venture capital backable will work? I can see a Khan Academy for a lot of the Indian masters out here to learn online.
How do you make money?
How do you make money? And so the question which is why Khan Academy also got grants from a lot of people. So you get grants over there, you actually invest through grants. It could be through grants.
Why do VCs have herd mentality?
That's another good question. I think the herd mentality is typically at a very high level. Now what happens is, there could be a herd mentality of sector, I want to invest in the sector, and people go invest in the sector. We've actually, if you for example, one herd mentality was e-commerce for a while, right? If you look at our portfolio, we've been very disciplined. We made actually 2 or 3 bets in our portfolio. A lot of companies have made 15, 20 bets in their portfolio. And we took a conscious call on the bets we took. Similarly, if you look at some of the other companies, we were trying to be disciplined in our sector focus. But having said that, on a broader level, why people do that is, I think at the end of the day, people are looking for large trends, and they're saying, what are the large trends in a geography? So, for example, the large trend could be in India is like, oh, there's no organized retail, for example, e-commerce, everything has to go digital and distributed. So e-commerce will take off in a large way. So let's look at that as a large sector. Another large trend is the world is going through an economic crisis. So everybody's looking to cut costs in the enterprise. So let's look at low-cost software. So these are some of the large trends, and which is why low-cost software translated into cloud, because cloud is pay as you go. So let's pay as you go. Let's not pay upfront and capitalize money. So these are some of the large trends there's a lot of data explosion with Facebook, with Twitter, etc. So let's get into big data analytics. So if you look at all of this, it's all coming from global trends. So VCs are trying to identify what are the geographic or global trends that will create large companies in those geographies that can benefit with those trends. So that's what's going on. So it may sound like herd mentality, but actually, if you look at the very top level, it's a VC trying to say where are the pockets of non-linear value creation that can be exponential, fast.
So if you were to give me those white spaces for India specifically, according to you, your view, what would those be?
No, sir, we've taken a lot of bets on, I think, our bet really is human capital solving global problems. Mm-hmm. That's really what our bet is.
That's too broad.
No, it's not broad. In the technology, the software space, in the internet space, we've done a company called Unmetric, which is doing social media benchmarking. It's actually doing competitive intelligence. Most of the clients are global. The company based in Chennai, right? So we're doing stuff. Everything we're doing, we're trying to figure out, is the entrepreneur really solving a global problem? India is one market. So from social media to productivity to a company like PubMatic that actually is doing real-time bidding on ad platforms, to a company like Dhruva that's doing, look at our portfolio, a company like Dhruva that actually is doing mobile backup, to a company like Gluster that's doing open source storage. If you just go down our portfolio, you'll see that we are taking this sort of very bottom-up approach, saying what does the entrepreneur do? And is he really trying to solve a large problem? And if he is, then let's engage. Let's understand what the entrepreneurs are trying to do. And that's really, if you ask me, I think the big trend we're seeing in India is that the entrepreneurs in India are now focused on solving globally large problems on the technology side, and that's something which I think we're excited about.
Interesting. I think just running into our conversation,
Sure.
I think we spoke a lot of interesting trends in technology. I think one that's also coming, besides on education, it's an entire wave of, companies like EasyTap or MPOS,
Yeah.
point of sales. What is sort of your view on that?
So we looked at that space in general. I think the question mark we had in that space is that there is still still a fair bit of cash economy in this country, and a lot of the small and medium retail are still happy to accept cash. So unless you have a lot of consumers walking with plastic and saying, I'll only pay with plastic, a small and medium retailer will not take out his mobile phone, add on this dongle and swipe a card. So they will not go and offer that. So our question is, how long will this take in this country to mature? Because in other countries where this has worked really well, it is a plastic economy. Everybody's walking around with 4 credit cards in their pocket. And so when they go to buy a cup of coffee, they pay with a credit card in most economies. Right? So if you go buy a donut, you pay with a credit card. So in that economy, this works because even a guy on the street selling hot dogs saying, how do I get this credit card? I need to put my mobile phone, my dongle and swipe it. In our country, the 99.9% of the guys are saying, give me the cash. So then what is the motivation for the guy to take out his credit card and take out his dongle and his phone and say, no, you don't pay cash, take out your credit card and pay me. So it's a very behavioral subtlety, but it is a question everywhere about it. But having said conceptually, will this take off in this country? I think there will be a few guys who will probably win in the sector. I don't know who will win right now. But I think over the next decade or 2 decades, you have to believe that consumers will use plastic more and more, will go into retail more and more and pay plastic. So the trend is in the right direction. The question is how fast.
Interesting. My last question to you. If you give me predictions on 2 categories. One's first, how the venture capital system will evolve in India, and technology, how would those look like for you?
I think the venture capital will evolve in how it's evolved globally. I think there will be venture firms in the next 5 years who will start seeing large exits coming through, and they start being defined as leading firms in the country. And unfortunately or fortunately, capital markets are efficient. So whoever those firms are, the LP capital will flow there. And the firms who have not shown us large exits or reasonable exits will not get LP capital. So the pie will shrink. It's happening in the US right now. So there'll be I think a subset of firms going forward. Once there's a clarity on who the winners and losers are. So that's what's for. So I think there will be, in my mind, there might be a short-term expansion of venture capital because LPs are excited about India, and over the next 5-7 years there will be a shrinkage again. So that's sort of our view on as the sort of the firms get more clear on who's doing what and who's doing a good job where. On technology, I think I'm a firm believer that we will see billion-dollar exits out of Indian technology in the next 5 years, and I'm a firm believer on that. I've said this to my team internally, to investors, that India will start seeing global successes out of this country that have billion-dollar exits in technology area within the next 5 years, and it's really going to change the world. But we are thinking that way, and it only happened in the last 5 years.